Hi, everyone, and welcome to another Sunday Talk within the Nine-Sided Circle. I'm your host, Noor Kyle.
And I am her faithful sidekick, Mushtaq Ali.
Yeah, and thank you for joining us, whether you're here live with the group or watching on the replay. So happy to have you here with us. Thank you for joining in. Much appreciated. Likewise appreciated is if you might be up for subscribing to our channel if you haven't already, liking this video if you enjoy it, and leaving a comment and joining in the conversation. We always enjoy reading the comments, and we try to respond, or other people might respond. We like to see that engagement.
Yeah, and the comment section has been very lively lately.
Yes, yep, and we welcome that. So, if you'd like to support us in other ways, you can consider donating. We have three ways to do that. We have PayPal, we have Stripe, and we have Coffee, which allows you to do either and also allows you to do repeating donations. So if you think you might like to kick a bit of change our way every month, that's how you would do it via Coffee, and we welcome that as well.
And it keeps the lights on for us.
Yes. And of course, we have our retreat going still. Our deadline is July 18th, but we still have a few spots open and we are looking to fill them. So if you've been, hanging out on the periphery, on the fence, you're not sure if you want to join in, there is room for you and we would love to have you join us.
And it's going to be an incredible time. You will learn things that you can't learn anywhere else on the planet right now.
It's
And
true.
you'll get to see one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yep. But if you have not chatted with us one-on-one before, you can do like our student Brian did last year. He set up a session with us so that he could get to know us, and that allowed him to feel out whether it would be a good fit for him. So if that's what you're feeling up for, you can shoot us an email and inquire about that as well. Because, yeah, we want everyone who is feeling just, the inkling of interest in like a pull to come to feel empowered to make a choice. And we would love to chat with you and give you more information if you need it. But you can also find information in the description below. We have a link to the page that I invite you to check out so you can see all of the information we have to offer on the retreat, and it gives you the opportunity to join the retreat mailing list, which is not a commitment, but it lets me know that you're interested and I get to send you information as it comes out. It will also let you know what next steps are if you do decide that you'd like to sign up. So I look forward to having any discussions about the retreat. Anything else, Mush Talk? We do one-on-ones as well, one-on-one consulting. We also do two-on-ones if you're interested with talking
Yeah,
with
we'll
both of
gang
us
up
at the
on you.
same time. Yes, we'll gang up on you. That's a great way to put it. We'll gang up on you as we get to know you and you get to know us. So if that's interesting to you, you can send us an email. And our email is in the description. You can also join our Facebook group, which we're encouraging, and our email list, because those are the ways that we make sure we all can stay connected. Even if one social media platform goes under, we always have something we can fall back on that way. Anything else, Mushtaq?
Nah,
Yeah. All right. So let's get to our topic this Sunday
what
evening.
is our topic this Sunday?
Well, it's an interesting one. Potentially, as many of the conversations we have are potentially controversial. We are going to be talking about is free will a thing? Is it not a thing? Science has indicated its point of view, and we are not going against science, but we do have some thoughts on how to unsimplify the discussion.
Yeah.
So, where
And,
should we begin?
well, what's the title of?
Yeah, I actually was spacing out on the title, but I am looking at the description right now. Our topic title tonight is Free Will and Free Won't, a Sufi view of power and authority.
Yeah.
So, multi layered subject matter.
Alrighty, are we ready?
Yeah, let's dive in.
Okay, I'm going to start the evening off by reading to you guys something that I wrote many years ago, and it is salient to the discussion this evening. It's short, so bear with me. We are our own captors. Civilization can, in my estimation, be best modeled as a rather unique sort of zoo. Wild humans have been captured, taken from their natural habitat, and installed in fake habitats that superficially resemble their natural environment. These humans are then taught tricks and rewarded for doing the trick while being punished for failing to do the trick. If you know anything about zoos, you know that this kind of captivity will quite literally drive the animals insane. Humans have developed coping mechanisms that keep full-on psychotic break more or less at bay so that they can be unsane rather than insane. These coping mechanisms are called religion, politics, and addiction. Religion is developed from the stories that we poor primates tell ourselves about how there is a powerful, unseen zookeeper, or several zookeepers, who, if we are good and productive and follow all of the rules, will one day take us to a special part of the zoo where we will be happy. Sometimes one of the denizens of the zoo will claim to be in touch with the zookeeper and will teach the other captives new tricks, like chanting to help them develop states of auto-hypnosis so they may better endure the zoo. When none of this is enough, they fight over who the zookeeper likes best. Politics is the second great coping mechanism. These days, politics can be divided into two main factions labeled liberal and conservative. The liberal faction spends its time trying to make changes to the zoo that will give the inmates better, more comfortable experiences of captivity. Meanwhile, the conservatives want everybody to obey the alpha males and to not have any change, since change is seen as dangerous and threatening. They hope that if they submit to the alphas, they will be taken care of. These two factions will have brutal fights to achieve supremacy in the pecking order of the zoo, thereby distracting themselves from their captivity. Addiction is the last and best defense against life in the zoo. When one is focused on the object of one's addiction, everything else fades into the background. This is why addiction is so popular these days as a coping mechanism. Now, here's the most hilarious part of the situation. There's no zoo anymore. There are no zookeepers, nor are there any staff to maintain the zoo. We do all the work of keeping ourselves confined and conditioned to our captivity ourselves. We self-condition for this. We condition all of our offspring as well. We are our own captors. So there you have it. Exciting, huh?
Love it. Very deep and yeah, very deep and all very much to the point.
No, I'm not sure about deep, but I had fun.
Yeah.
Well, you
Relevant to our
forgot suicide.
times. Suicide.
Yeah, that happens. That's not really a coping mechanism though, because suicide means that you just opt out of the game. No more to cope with. But yeah, suicide is something that happens. That's when I made a distinction there between unsane and insane. And I got that distinction from Alfred Korzybski, the guy who developed general semantics. Insane, by definition, is that you are either a danger to yourself, a danger to others, or gravely disabled by reason of mental defect. And that means you can't take care of your own needs. So somebody who is suicidal is a danger to themselves, therefore insane. Um, unsane is to have completely irrational thoughts, but not to the extent that you cannot function in society. So you look at people at political rallies and you go, man, that's crazy. But it's not insane. It's just unsane, if you understand the distinction.
Yeah, it's a really good word.
I always liked it since the first time I read it, I went, wow, we need that
Clarity.
word. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what does this have to do with power and authority?
You can leverage addiction, religion, and the second one I came in a little late.
Politics.
Politics. Yeah.
Politics. Can leverage it to have authority over people and
Yeah.
power.
Okay, the difference between power and authority is power in this definition is the ability to force people to do what you want, to impose your will upon them. As Chairman Mao said, all politics comes out of the barrel of a rifle.
Hmm.
Authority is what you grant to other people that makes them think that they have power. So politicians, by and large, have no power. They have a lot of authority because we are conditioned to obey. Obey those in authority. Pretty much every holy book says that. So does that distinction make sense?
Yeah. People are nodding their heads yes. Any questions on that? Since we don't all need to be bobbleheads who just, go with the vibe or whatever here.
Well, I think there's two sides to it. It's one thing to say that we grant politicians authority, but then on the other side of that is the politicians make laws, and the laws are maintained through power.
Politicians make laws. If enough people decided that that law didn't count, do the politicians have enough guns to enforce it? And the politicians only get to make laws as long as we believe that they have the right to do so. This goes back to the 1960s and the question of what would happen if they had a war and nobody came? It's almost unthinkable. It is almost unthinkable for us to entertain the idea that we do not have to obey people in authority.
Yeah, but I think one of the more interesting developments recently is the way that the Supreme Court in the US has become so overtly politicized and its ratings are just plunging.
Yeah, that's
It-
going to be an example, perhaps, if people stop believing anything, because the Supreme Court is interesting in that whereas the Congress and the executive have checks on them, the Supreme Court doesn't have those kind of checks. I mean, theoretically, one of the justices or several of the justices could be removed, but that'll never happen because that would take a consensus in Congress.
Yeah, one thing I've discovered recently is that there is an interesting group which I think is called the Judicial Conference that is sort of looking at which is made of like senior judges in the federal system, as I understand it, which is seriously looking at the whole question of whether there could be an enforceable code of ethics for the Supreme Court, just as there is for every other federal judge.
It will be interesting to see what develops from that, that's for sure.
Yeah, I would be happy if we just had every year, every citizen of the United States has to vote on whether or not they want to keep each justice. And if a justice doesn't get enough votes, they should be taken out and hung.
Um,
That would motivate them to make decisions that were not necessarily along their political and or religious lines. I'm being facetious, of course. I don't really think that. I think tarring and feathering would be fine.
Todd, did you have a thought?
Yes, I was just serendipitously reading an article on an analysis of the calls of bats.
Mhm.
They used to think it was mostly random squeaking, but now with better analysis, they found that bats have a whole bunch of different vocalizations, and most of them are either arguments with each other or ways of getting other bats to join in social groups with them to win arguments with other bats. So I mean, it's like squeaks to say you're roosting too close to me, all the way to squeaks by male bats to make unwanted mating advances at female bats.
They
And
sound just like people.
it made me think that that the basis of politics goes very, very deep and isn't
Ooh,
just confined to us.
that is fascinating. Thank you, Todd. Yeah, and just to bring it out of the chat, Adrian was saying, well, there is the weapons of mass distractions
Yep.
as well. Yeah. So let's loop this all in to the topic at hand tonight. We're talking about free will, free won't.
Yeah. So most of this stuff does not, in at least in this country, work by the application of power against people. For the most, I mean, there's always a threat of that. There are police with guns who will come to your house and do bad things to you under certain circumstances, but not under most circumstances. Mostly, we obey authority. Unless you're driving a Tesla on a street in Palo Alto. So, stop sign, right? Most people stop at stop signs, whether there's anybody looking or not. I would like to think that that's out of a rational understanding that we need to take care of each other and not run children down. Uh, but it's mostly just rote conditioning. You've learned to do that. And so you do it unless you own a Tesla and then you think that stop signs don't matter. And I say that by living next to a stop sign and the most Tesla dense place in America.
Yeah.
They never stop at stop signs. It's kind of frightening.
And the growing joke, as we can attest, and as Adrian has mentioned, Teslas are like the new BMWs in terms of like the stereotypical symbol of
Entitled.
entitlement in public space. Yes.
So back in the 70s, there were a series of experiments where they hooked people up to EEGs and watched their brains. And they noticed that there was a lag of about 500 milliseconds on average, between when the unconscious mind decided to do something and when the body did it. And within that 500 milliseconds, about at 400 milliseconds, the conscious mind would be aware of what was about to happen. Oh, I'm going to reach out and twist this doorknob. You're all mostly familiar with this, right? This is pretty solid,
Yeah.
solid material. Yeah.
This has been tested. I don't know how frequently it's taught these days, but I do know it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a standard module in most psychology classes.
Human behavior type things.
Now, one of the inferences that was drawn from this is that free will is an illusion, because your unconscious mind decides to do something way before your conscious mind knows that it's going to happen, and then does it. And your conscious mind just goes, oh, I did that. I chose to do that.
And kind of claiming the behavior.
Yeah. And so that says there is no free will. But what most of these studies did not notice at first, but some are now catching on to, is within that 100 milliseconds, the conscious mind can make a choice to not do the behavior. Even though it comes up and you want to do it, the conscious mind can go, no. And you've all experienced this. Every one of you here, I will bet money, has experienced this. Some of you might have been in an argument with somebody and you really want to punch them in the face, really, really bad. They deserve to be punched in the face. And your body tightens up to do it, and your mind goes, no, wait a second, don't do that. That's stupid. And you don't do it. So this is why I actually stole the term free won't from a writer that I like. And I think that it's a perfect idea for this, that you have both. At first, you have free won't. You have the ability, if you are paying attention, to interrupt the natural habitual behavior that your unconscious has determined is the appropriate thing to do. You go, no, we're not going to do that this time. This is, according to some Sufis, the first step to personal freedom. It's not to have free will, it's to have free won't. What do you think? Are you picking up what I'm putting down?
Yeah, Osama, then James, then Austin, I guess.
All right. Osama.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm assuming that we're defining free will as consciously making a decision or not making a decision, or taking an action or not taking an action.
Yeah, free will would be consciously choosing to do something. Free won't is consciously choosing not to do something that would be an automatic behavior.
Right. So so we're aiming for a state of wakefulness in pretty much every decision that's happening. As the decisions that matter. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's the term we're looking for.
Yeah.
There are
Because
plenty of times where we don't need to have a free won't. Um, you're walking down the street, your feet don't need to be told what to do or not to do in most cases.
right. Okay, yeah, so that makes sense because when I came to this call, when I saw the title or the discussion, I was thinking of the bigger things in life, whether or not we have free will, as far as like what is that? Like destiny or
Predestination and that kind of
yeah,
thing.
stuff like that. Because most of the time when I hear discussions regarding free will, it's whether or not we're actually changing or we're shaping our reality or not, and that's kind of the discussions. But yeah, that makes sense that we're talking about this wakeful state, um to make decisions from that state. That makes sense.
So who's next, Noor?
Um, it's going to
Jane?
be James, Austin, then Todd.
Well, this brings to mind in various ways Viktor Frankl's principle that the fundamental human freedom was to choose your attitude and your response to your circumstances. But it's more active because the Frankel thing can be used or misused because it often implies just a mental attitude you have in your head into some kind of passivity or resigned fatalism or something like that. Um, Whereas by emphasizing, I suppose, free won't, there's something more engaged about that. That may be just me getting all worked up over language, but it does seem there's something fundamentally or potentially human when you can choose your response, even if you can't choose your circumstances.
Yeah.
That's just the what came to mind with that. That's it. That's all I've got.
Yeah, this is good. This is all refining what we're talking about here between Osama talking about, is this the, more of a philosophical, theological conversation about free will and predestination and the relationship of those things to divinity and all of that stuff. We are getting at the grassroots here.
Well, when choosing your attitude actually has direct impact on your survival, a la Frankel in the concentration camps.
Yes.
And what was I going to say? It's eluded me. Damn it! It's not just a philosophical speculation. It has very raw existential relevance and necessity. I was going to say something else and it's eluded me, so I'll end there.
Yeah, okay. Chew on it.
Sort of,
We can return to that. And yes, this goes even beyond reframing our understanding of our circumstances. This is
yes.
about the biological mechanisms within and how we can understand them in such a way that we are not we're not just accepting this argument that some people do make about this idea that, oh, we are so impulse driven biologically that there's nothing we can do, so why should we even bother worrying about this stuff? Just give up. Go with the,
And that's presented as something that's obvious, but in fact, it's based on a whole stack of metaphysical and scientific or pseudoscientific assumptions. It's not just that determinism is not such a given. It's often hard for people who brought up with certain worldviews to imagine it, but yeah. And what I was trying to think about before, in sort of pop non-dualism, neo
and
pseudo advaita, it's popular to sort of say, well, nothing's real or the self doesn't exist. and that gets translated to sort of 19th century mechanistic stuff. Or you're just a robot being
Yes.
pushed along by the divine. Adyashanti had this wonderful spiel about that, and his final conclusion was, "When you appear to have choice, act as though you have a choice." And so,
That's a good attitude to bring
Yeah.
to it too, James.
yeah,
So I want to, all of that is relevant and it ties in what Austin was talking about earlier. I would love to hear more about what Austin might have to say, and then we'll hear from Todd before moving on.
Yeah, I was just about to echo on that because that experiment that Mushtaq brought up, Nisargadatta's disciple, something Stevenson. He's actually on the non-dual channel. He's really brilliant. But it was discouraging, right? Especially coming out of like I was very into just initiating my own spiritual path and then coming across his teaching. I was like, well, basically, you have no free will. You're not the doer. There's nothing that you can do. And Nisargadatta taught love. Like he talks extensively about love in his teachings, but there was almost like the element of this element of like doing something with your life, like reaching something with your life spiritually. He was like, yeah, this is just you're nothing. You're a non-doer. You're not going to get anywhere.
Like
And
resignation.
basically, and
Yeah, and you have to remember that he lived in a little shack over a sewer.
and he had a lot of students. A lot of people
Yeah,
came
he
to
did.
his
Lots and
teaching.
lots of people would come and sit in that smelly little room.
I think it was misinterpreted by Stevenson, by his disciples, because he did express a lot of great ideas, like watch your mind, be conscious of yourself, this almost like sobriety of like making sure that thoughts are not overtaking you at every moment. And there's also things that I didn't necessarily agree with. It's like, oh, well, the world is like going to shit and people are dying, and I'm just stoic about it. So I guess to some extent, it's like this is very refreshing to hear because I sense in a way that we should act as if we have will in some sense. I also feel like there's different traditions that will say that you reach a spiritual maturity to where it's non-doership, but it's the will of God. And I'm not sure if you guys are going to elaborate on that or not. And I don't want to go off on a tangent, but it's just something that's very interesting to me.
Yeah, uh it's actually very important because my sense of what I think of as the non-dual bros and the non-dual babes is that they have totally missed the point, that they don't understand a damn thing that they're saying. Maybe uh, the Indian guy knew something, maybe not. I've met a lot of people who claim to be his students, and they were all dickheads. Yeah, their lives were a mess. They talked a good game, but they couldn't play a good game. And of course, I'm an incredibly judgmental person about these things, so you have to take everything I say with a small grain of
Through
salt.
that lens, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, from what I've heard, yeah, like one of his like main students, I think she was the one that published. She didn't really have good habits. Like wasn't really taking care of herself. Was a smoker. Was someone who was
Yeah.
quite angry all the time.
Yeah.
And I found myself in some sense adopting unconsciously some of these things. Like, well, nothing really matters. I'm like, I'm the non-doer of things. I'm like, I need to drive my car safely. I need to be present.
Yeah. And I have told it before. Have you heard me tell the story of the Sufi master, the student, and the elephant?
I have not.
Then you're going to get the wonderful chance to do that. So, a Sufi master and his student was walking through the forest one day when this elephant, big bull elephant, jumps out of the trees and he's pissed. And the master turns to his student and says, "Elephant, run." And he takes off. And the student stands there and he goes, this is a test because I know that there is a oneness of the being and I am one with the elephant, and the elephant is actually illusionary. There is no elephant, there is only God. And so he stands there. And the elephant runs up and grabs him with his trunk and throws him on the ground and jumps up and down on him and then splits. And the guy's laying there going, "Ugh." And the teacher comes back and says, "Why didn't you run?" And the student said, "Well, master, you taught me that this world is illusionary and that only God exists." And the master says, "Yes, this world is illusionary, and the illusion has rules. And one of the rules is that if you get in the way of a mad elephant, it will stomp you and it will hurt. That's part of the game that we play here." And knowing the game rules for the universe is kind of important because there are elephants.
Gotta find ways to embody all of those 99 names, right? And the
Yep.
99 names stands for infinity. So endless qualities
Yeah.
that need to
And
be
the illusion
expressed.
has rules.
Yep.
Yeah, I could almost sense that there was a lot of evading of maturity
Yeah.
in that.
Even one might even say spiritual bypassing.
Yes, I think that's what I was referring to, which
Yeah.
is the dangers of that is incomprehensible almost.
Ever present. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Thank you, Austin. I want to
is
make
there
sure.
free will? Maybe, but there is certainly free won't. We know that for a fact because it moves needles.
Todd, how about you?
Yeah.
One of the things that I always come back to when I'm troubled by these is the late Stephen Jay Gould's perspective, where this was when the neurological research was just starting to be done on this when he wrote this essay. He said not to think of oneself as having a self or not, but that inside all of us there is what he called a parliament of desires. And the way you move depends on which ones, when it comes down to it, have the most influence, and that we are flexible enough because of the way we're put together that we can change how much we listen to the various members of the parliament, and of which just one is the part that's conscious of itself. I always find it hard to argue with Stephen Gould when he's in his thoughtful mode. And it just helps it helps resolve some of my personal conflicts about that whole thing, and seems to be a useful thing to remember when addressing these questions.
Yes, and that brings up thoughts about, the fragmented eyes that live in all of us, or, the vast majority of us, and how at any given time a different one is coming to the fore.
And that they're all pulling in their own
Yeah.
directions at the same time, but we have the capacity to change, built into the way our brains are built to change some of that and to make choices about which of those things we listen to in the aggregate in ourselves.
Yes. Thank you for that, Todd. Ian.
Yeah, I wanted to come back to what I thought I heard Austin saying when he started speaking, which was that somehow people were being taught that there was no free will. And the thing that immediately struck me that it's inherently self-contradictory to be telling people that they have no free will, but you're trying to teach them.
Yeah. It's good you noticed this.
what's the point in teaching? What is the point of taking on that role if it doesn't even do anything, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It changes nothing.
A steady income with no real physical labor involved.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So, Mushtaq, I want to throw it back to you and
All right.
the free won't.
Okay. So with free will, first of all, there is no downside to assuming that you have free will, to assume that you have free will. No downside to it at all. If you're completely wrong about that, you're going to do whatever you do anyway. So you might as well enjoy the sense of freedom. And maybe you'll find some free will. That could very well be possible. There are indications that a person can develop free will over time with the proper practices. And those practices start with the free won't. We have talked about this before. We talked about the stop exercise. Now, in Arabic, the word that they use for this, the stop exercise is wukuf. Wukuf means to pause. And the idea of the pause is even within our precepts. And it's the ninth precept, which was added some years or a couple of centuries after the first eight, added by Bahauddin Naqshband, which were the three pauses, which we don't need to get into because we've talked about them at length. And we will put a link to the idea of the stop exercise and the three wukuf up here somewhere at the end of this. But we have come back over the centuries to this idea of the pause. The latest goes back again to Alfred Korzybski and one of his students, a science fiction writer called A.E. van Vogt, who classified it as the cortical thalamatic pause, which is the moment between perceiving the desire to do an action and either allowing that desire or stopping that desire, to pause to see which one you should actually do. And that is free won't.
I feel like this can take place in things as simple as I'm sure all of us who have cell phones have experienced that impulsive picking up of the phone, getting ready to unlock it and then scroll a bunch or whatever, check apps, check things, to even practice there.
Yeah, that's actually a good place to practice because you got a Pavlovian response to that damn phone.
Just looking at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I hear the sound and I feel a twitch in my right hand.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
yeah.
Osama, did you want to share about that?
I have a question actually.
Sure.
So, Mushtaq, you just shared that pause, developing that pause, whether to take the action or not, is what you call free won't.
Yes.
What is free will in that?
Free will come on later.
Okay. So I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly what you're saying.
Yeah,
Okay.
free will is the ability to choose consciously. But in order to get there, you have to break your conditioning, and that's the free won't.
Yeah. So I think starting with something so automatic as checking our phones can be a really good, just it's so easy to practice with that because so many of us deal with that impulse all the time.
Yeah. Or do you have any other addictions? And we all have
Yeah.
our little addictions. In that moment where you unconsciously reach for something and can even consciously give yourself an excuse why doing the thing is good. in that one instance, and you can still create the pause and choose not to do it. I mean, it's how you quit smoking, right? Every time you reach for a cigarette, you stop, you pause, and you choose not to do it.
Wait a second. This is getting juicy. Hold on a second. Hold on. Hold on. Okay. So there's this desire or whatever it is, right? This thing that's, but whether it's action, reaction, there's the pause. I'm observing what's happening inside, and I'm saying, I'm choosing from that pause to say, yes, I will take that action,
Or no, I won't take that action.
or no, I won't take that action.
Yeah.
Now, you just said that possibly one can also pretend or give themselves a good reason why to take that action or not take that action,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, that's
Um,
why no comes first.
okay, so yeah, let's talk more about that.
Okay, so I used to smoke when I was young. And this is where I really learned about this because the desire for a cigarette comes up unconsciously. You get certain stimuli that are mostly below the level of consciousness where your body starts to crave another nicotine hit. And then you reach out for it. If you stop yourself, that part of you will probably say something like, this one cigarette will be okay. I'm going to quit by cutting down.
Tomorrow's another day.
Yeah. And you can talk yourself into doing the action, and that's part of the addiction. When you have set the intention to quit smoking, then your only response to the desire to smoke is no. Anything else is falling into the addiction trap. And this is true for all addictions.
Yeah. And it's a little challenging with a cell phone because there are legitimate reasons to pick it up and look at it, respond to a message, return a phone call. So this is where mindfulness comes in. Am I doing this because I'm feeling the itchy impulse? Or am I doing this with purposefulness?
So, and I'm sorry for like going because this is
Oh no,
like
it's good.
yeah.
It's good.
So to say that, okay, I am, you know what? This is tough. This nicotine hit, I need it right now. This is the last cigarette. But I'm consciously choosing, I know I'm choosing it. I'm consciously choosing this last cigarette to be. In that moment, what is this exercise called? Am I exercising free will, or am I am I exercising, playing this
Playing the game.
playing myself, really? I'm playing myself, right?
Well, you tell me, which is it? Is it really free will when you succumb to the impulse to smoke a cigarette? Because that's mechanical.
Right. It's the addiction that's making the
It's the
decision.
addiction. And the lying to yourself about your choosing to do it is part of the addiction. Because it is a lie.
Right. So that's what you're calling, this is why the free won't is
Yeah, that's why it comes first.
okay, beautiful.
Yeah, and this has been true for everything I've ever worked on for it. Austin.
Yeah, I struggle with that for a moment because let's say consciously I want to have a glass of wine. I'm not addicted to wine. It's probably not good for me. in excess. But I say, well, I stop and I think, yeah, I want to enjoy this glass of wine, this nice
Okay. What's
Merlot.
there's a difference there. You're not addicted to the wine and you haven't made an intention to stop drinking.
Okay, okay. I see the distinction there. Yeah, as opposed to the impulse that I need this
Yeah.
external st for I experienced this recently. Not with cigarettes, with Zyn. They're the like nicotine
Yeah, I
uh
know what they are. They're like little nicotine pack thingies.
yeah, for your lips. And
Hmm.
I had one and I was like, this is not strong enough. I had a second one and then I got burned. Like I had the stomach
Hmm.
ache for like 3 hours. And that's what usually happens to me. I give into an impulse, it bites me in the ass, and I'm like, I'm not doing this again.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so now you have one more tool to not do it. And the price that you pay for being able to exercise the no is a certain amount of discomfort, especially when it comes to addiction.
Hmm.
I feel like that's unfortunately one of the ways that I think a lot of us, but unfortunately one of the ways that I've learned not to fall into certain bad habits. Usually I get sick, usually I get a really bad stomach ache, or I feel some sort of actual pain. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Maybe not the most efficient way to do it, but if it works, if it keeps you from taking the first pack, uh, then all to the good.
I agree. I agree.
What happens when you forget about the stomach ache?
Which happens.
Yeah,
Hmm.
And I'm like, well, maybe I'll have, instead of having two, I'll have one. So we would stop.
Hmm. Yep.
yeah, and it gets tricky.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
I can see that. Yeah.
this is why, I mean, for people who are dealing with, let's say, food sensitivities, just as a more, neutral example, people journal about it because they don't remember what happens when they eat certain things. And then they eat again, and they're like, I have no idea why I'm getting hives or a stomach ache or whatever, because they're not keeping track, they're not recording. And
I
so, I mean, that might be one thing to do for those of you who are inclined towards that kind of thing. Like, if there's a habit you're trying to break or that you feel neutral about, or you notice a pattern when you do certain things, document that so that you have that information as a data point
yeah,
for reflection.
I'm curious if the idea of free will has embedded in it the necessity to take care of our, like to really take care of ourselves.
I think there's definitely something to that, Austin. That's food for thought, too. But I remember it may not always start with us taking care of ourselves, it may be caring for someone else and wanting to be in a position to, well, I mean, here's another random example. I used to be a chronic nail biter as a child into my teen years, and then I had a crush on a girl with beautiful fingernails, and I wanted her to see me without my fingernails all chewed off, right? So I almost instantly broke that habit because I cared more about her finding me beautiful than I did about continuing my addiction to biting my nails. So sometimes that's how it happens too. Cherie.
Can you speak more about emotional addiction? So, for
Mm.
example, that I've been brought up in a culture where I'm always living within the confines of someone else's demands. So, my parents, I've got to live up to certain expectations. With a husband, I do the same thing. So, in my adult life, and it's taken me decades to actually realize that deep asleepness was holding me in a certain position, and I was fulfilling someone else's life versus fulfilling my own. So that I won't do that now. As Mushtaq said, this is going to get uncomfortable when you start saying, I won't, and how to break those emotional cycles, because they're really tough. Because I have started doing it and I'm getting better at it, but I think there's a lot of people who will have more difficulty defining what that is and how to say, I won't, in a kind and loving way towards themselves first, and also considering the person who's always seen them as this acquiescent, dutiful, obedient person.
There's a discomfort in going against the grain when it comes to other people's expectations. And I think it takes a lot of intentionality to resist squirming out of that discomfort. And so, in order to say no in that case, what's motivating the no? And I think we need to get clear on that in order to really give us the energy to pick up on that instant where we're stepping between that instant where we have access to know.
Yeah, so the awakening of that first sensation, what if I actually said no? And then that trepidation of actually sticking to that no, that's the difficulty, because it's so easy to fall back into pleasing another person.
Yeah.
Or just you're just so stuck in a groove. You're that asleep that you didn't even realize there was a problem until someone else comes along and say, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't let that to you. Why are you doing that? And then you think, no, I'm not. I chose that. And then you think, no, I didn't actually choose that. I'm just grooving into the family culture or the partnership culture. But is there a possibility to change that so that as an awakened person, it's not like I'm abandoning the relationship that I have with that person. And I find that's my challenge of, can I step up? Can I step up? But that's the hard bit, because even I find that even in sport, when I'm doing something, I'm thinking, no, that's really interesting. What's that resistance? And how come I can find so many distractions and excuses not to push myself that little bit. So this is not black and white for me. This is this shifting. And then it's actually a meandering towards that, being able to say a hard no.
Right. And I think that's true with a lot of things, but I think acknowledging the potential for discomfort there is,
Die from it.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it brings up that panic, like, oh my God, I've stopped. Am I really going to do this? Am I really going to commit to this stopping? I don't know.
Yeah.
Cold sweats. Ah, yeah.
I think I have more trouble with the emotional side than I do with the physical addiction.
Yeah,
That
I
said you
understand
have
that.
the I can do that. I can do that, and you make those steps. But when it's emotional, it seems nebulous and I can't seem to define it. And where have I slipped back? 2 steps forward, 1 step back. How do I get that little bit of muscle going, and that conviction of my own spirit to say, okay, you're doing okay. You can keep going. Apart from talking to you guys.
Hopefully we help. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that I find tougher,
Good.
that emotional addiction.
Thanks for bringing that in, Cherie, because this is not just simple, tangible
Mm.
stimulus response things. This is sometimes a bit more seemingly invisible, and yet the results are very palpable sometimes. Thanks, Cherie. Ian, do you have a quick thought? And then I want to make sure we talk about how this ties to, power and authority and all of this.
Yeah, when Shui was talking about all that, it it seemed to me that the key thing in some ways is to form the intention to not do that. Um, and to focus on building up the strength of the intention.
Yes, and we've
Um,
talked about how to do that many times here.
that was all.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, we talk about how, every time you build every time you're able to resist, every time you're able to say no, you're giving yourself an opportunity to build the strength of your intention and to experience being resilient. You're building your track record for success. And so that can be encouraging and reinforcing in itself.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to be able to start visualizing what it would be like if you succeeded.
I agree. Yep. Yeah. Thanks guys. I want to share Anissa's and then Mushtaq, your turn again. Anissa says, I think that's when being aware/awake is really important. One thing that always helps me, I always, my text box is so small. Let me make this bigger. I always try asking what's behind every reaction or action I'm about to do or indulge. I mean, we can never truly be objective, but I try my best to discern if this action or thought will benefit me or harm me in any way, shape, or form. Yeah, and it's hard to do that 100% of the time, but as we said earlier, we're not striving for 100% of the time. We're focused on the things that, as you say, we discern to be impactful, whether that's on us, on those we love, on the world, all of that. All right, Mushtaq.
Okay, so one important thought: not every unconscious action needs or benefits from a pause. If somebody accidentally or on purpose throws a basketball at your head, you don't want to pause to choose what to do. Let your body do the work. That being said, there are a lot of things that will benefit from the pause. One of my favorite little things when I was reading Dune was the idea that the Fremen have this word for that space between when you desire something and when you reach out and take it. And we need to use that space. How do we do this? Very simple. When you find yourself about to do something, like, oh, I'm going to reach out and open the door. That's a good time to practice because there's usually no downside to taking a moment. You take a breath, you notice your impulse to open the door. Then you ask yourself, is it my will that this door opens? And if the answer is yes, then you reach out and open it. And if the answer is no, you put your hand down. Does that make sense? And the trick is anytime it is safe to do that, you do it. So no basketballs flying at your head, no vicious dogs running at you with slobber coming off their mouths, none of that stuff. Let your body do its thing at that point. But for anything that you can safely make a choice, practice making the choice. And oftentimes, practicing the free won't is the way to do that at first. There's a trick that well known to hypnotherapists and NLP types is somebody who says, I should, right? I should do this. And you look at them and you say, I want you to rephrase that in two different ways. I want to do this. I refuse to do this. Tell me which one is true. And you'd be surprised how often that becomes revelatory because you hide your true desires behind the should. So taking that moment to look, to make the pause, and most often it's you refuse to do it. And that's a chance to practice free won't.
Yeah, Anissa's saying basically anything without survival might be a good opportunity.
Yeah. Without survival and without like screwing up relationships. But especially survival.
So this can be a really empowering practice, and it gets us out of this Pavlovian stimulus response mindset that allows us to be easily manipulated.
Yeah, and it gets you ready to do certain group exercises like the stop exercise.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who are going to be at the retreat, you'll experience that because we will do the stop exercise every day. Maybe. You never know when it might just jump out at you.
Maybe twice a day.
Maybe.
Maybe every 10 minutes. You never know.
Austin.
Yeah, I've had really good experiences with the stop exercise. Like I'll be walking from my room to the shower and stop, and I just feel this. I mean, obviously it's not anything crazy, right? It's not like an emotional response or I need to shower. I hope so, right? Just stopping and my body relaxes and I'm holding this whatever pose I stop in, and the presence that I feel is it's really powerful. It's really palpable as well. So I really like that you guys mentioned that as well.
Yeah, it's a good exercise. Yeah, will keep
That's,
you on your toes.
yeah, I mean that's an interesting way to utilize it too because you're in the process of fulfilling an intention. And that may be kind of automatic in a way, right? Like there's
Mhm.
this routine of like I go here, pick up my stuff, head towards the bathroom, turn on the shower, blah, blah, blah. But if you pause in the middle of that almost robotic routine, it brings you into a fresh moment of presence.
Yeah.
And then you continue forward with whatever it is you're going to do.
And it's no longer just one unit of behavior.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, along those lines, I want to ask whether, I mean, that sounds like doing the stop by initiating it yourself,
In that case,
which
yeah.
strikes me rather different from doing it when somebody else just calls it at a random moment.
Yeah, that's right. That adds a different layer to
It's
this
slightly
exercise.
different. And
Yeah.
if you're doing the stop exercises in a group correctly, it's not a random call. The facilitator is paying attention to the group. And when he feels a certain weight of unconsciousness in the group, that's when he calls it. Which makes it more interesting.
Yep. Well, Adrian offers every little victory grants you a certain oomph. Yeah, that's like I was talking about. But it
It's
has to
totally
be
true.
conscious. It has to be a conscious victory. Otherwise, it's not really, it's just the same old, really. Todd says, there are times when people need the ability to say yes more than no. If the power of won't is too strong an aspect of one's life. Me looking in a mirror here, he says.
Not,
Trusting. What's that?
I said not looking in a mirror here.
I have my chat box is like it has the thing in the way. I'm sorry about that. But yes, I get what you're saying. Not looking in the mirror here, trusting one's judgment and better impulses can be the right medicine for the condition. Yes, and I think we're trying to find balance for that here.
Yeah. We're just suggesting that the won't is easier to learn first. The most successful way to practice this is you start from the won't and then get to the will. Start with the no and then develop the yes. Because that keeps you out of the problem of using the excuse that I want to do this to break an intention.
Having been around engineers most of my adult life and suffering from analysis paralysis, as many of us do, it's the best. You're absolutely right, as near as I can tell. It's just that sometimes discernment is needed about which medicine is best for the person's condition at the time. It ain't easy.
Nope. And that's why you take that moment of pause when you can to see which one it actually is.
And on the other side of that, one thing I've heard of, not that I've ever done improv comedy, but one thing I've heard about it is that perhaps the core rule is wherever somebody goes, you say yes to it.
Yeah, that's for improv. And that's a very interesting exercise. And it's
yes
one.
And.
Yeah, yes and. So it's not just that you say yes, it's yes and. So
Right, yeah.
Noor says something about something to me, for instance.
You there?
Yeah. I'm there. I'm waiting for you.
Oh, let's go to the Stanford Mall this weekend.
Yes. And before we do that, let's think about where we might like to have lunch. and see if it is close enough to the Stanford Mall or whether it would be better to go to the lunch place first.
Ooh.
See, so I didn't have to say yes to going to the Stanford Mall. I just didn't have to shut her down.
Yep.
Yes and can be as potent as no.
Yep.
Yeah, I've just noticed Anissa's comments about groups like this one.
Yes.
And it strikes me that a very common practice in ideation, shall we say, is the whole damn my mind's going as blank as Biden's. What's the when people throw out are told to throw out ideas.
Brainstorming.
Brainstorming.
Yeah, there you
I
go.
can't believe that word vanished from my head. But so it is. But that's part of a very recognized technique of where a group works better than a single person.
Definitely. Yeah. So Anissa had said, and this is where groups like this one are important as well, because we can never go so far on our own quote subjectiveness unquote. That's when others' perspectives are really helpful to us to see through our own lies. And yeah, I mean, I really benefit from that myself, and sometimes that's why, like one-on-one therapy can be great. Sometimes group therapy can be even better because you get so many different perspectives on the same issues that it allows you to see more expansively. And this group is not therapy, but sometimes it can feel like it, right? Because we are offering each other all of these points of view and checking and balancing one another in ways that are really meant to uplift us as a whole. And that's a real blessing. I mean, I know that I benefit from this group in that way myself too. Austin says this is better than group therapy. I mean, God willing, we all get some benefit from this for sure.
Yeah,
Yes.
it's one of the reasons why I make a point of showing up for the live sessions rather than just the recordings.
Yeah. And the thing is that this is for the people who show up for the live sessions. The people who just watch the recordings, they get to do that like you're auditing a class. But the people who show up here and who are the participants, which is you guys, are the reason we do this.
Yep. As we've said in the past, this is not a lecture.
Yes.
This
Nor is it
is
some little short form thing that we give you some words of wisdom, maybe some non-dual psychobabble, and then go on our merry way. And people can sit around and go, wow, this is for learning. And it is specifically for y'all who show up and participate in the learning process, because that's where most learning happens. And then everybody else, it's like the people who audit a class. They're welcome to sit back there and audit the class and perhaps even get a question answered after the class. But this is the sohbet, the conversation.
And that's how this conversation connects to authority and power.
Yes. Yeah. So you always have to think about who out there wants to physically coerce me into doing something or not doing something. Where are the men with guns? Most Americans don't have to worry too much about that. Other places you have to worry a lot more about that. Here in the US, not so much under most circumstances, unless you happen to think that Palestinians have a right to live, then they'll beat you up. But aside from that, authority is maybe I offended somebody.
Who? Don't know.
No, don't care.
Todd.
Oh, Todd.
Todd,
Maybe he
what?
just had to get going.
Yeah.
Okay,
Can I mention something?
Yes.
sure.
I'm almost curious as to what conscious authority would look like. Because the
Conscious
authority,
authority looks like so. I had a sheikh, a teacher, and we had a contract. And part of the contract was that I would listen to his advice and take it very, very seriously. And unless there was some reason that I absolutely couldn't follow his advice, I would take it. So I gave him authority, and all authority is granted.
As we said in the
Anybody,
beginning of this
yeah,
discussion, yes.
yeah, anybody who thinks that they have authority over you without you giving your permission for them to do so is mistaken, unless you are completely unconscious. So that's what conscious authority looks like. He was very cognizant of the fact that he was in a position to influence, and he would use that very, very carefully.
I actually had a conversation about this with a student this week where I spoke explicitly about the fact that I have a responsibility to make sure I am very cognizant of the fact that I have the ability to influence in that relationship with that particular student. And so I was saying to them that I was expressing that responsibility and outlining how important it was to make sure I handle that ability to influence with care and with consent, and also to check in with them to make sure that their input is always part of my calculations about how our relationship gets handled.
yeah, I mean, there's a huge responsibility with that, right? I mean, you have the role of being a teacher. And so you do have to take into account what she's giving you, what she's expressing to you.
Yes. And be clear that the person does not have to listen to me. There is no obligation to do anything that I suggest or anything that I say or believe anything that I believe.
Right.
Yeah. And Sheikh said, and he and I had this discussion a long time ago. He asked me, have you noticed how I never order anybody to do anything? And it's true, he rarely offered anything in the modal operator of necessity.
You must.
Yes.
I order you to.
And he said, this is because God likes me. And if I order you to do something and you don't do it, God might be upset with you. So I never order people to do things. In the 25 years of our relationship, he only ever said, you must do this once. It was actually a you must not. You must not go to this place tomorrow. You must come here instead. And it turned out that that was a very wise thing to do, because had I gone to the place I was going, I would have gotten caught up in a natural disaster.
Yikes.
Yeah. And so I was smart enough to listen to him in that circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
But most often it was always, I suggest you do this, but it's up to you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean that authority is a trust.
Yeah.
And faith,
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
because giving someone authority is a big deal.
Mm-hmm. And that should be recognized.
Yep. And you have to remember that you can always exercise your free won't.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Some folks need to be reminded of that more than others. So that's a big deal too.
Yeah, there's I don't know what it is exactly, but there's this thing of choosing that teacher, having that trust, having that faith, and that contract that you mentioned. Okay, I'm gonna take this advice to the best of my ability, and I'm gonna take action with this advice to the best of my ability. Even though I might think at times that I know best, but I'm trusting that you know better than that. So if I go to Adrian and tell him, teach me guitar, please. I've never held a guitar, right? And I tell him, teach me. And he tells me, hold it like this. This is how you hold the guitar. And then I tell him, no, but I like to hold it like this. It's easier for me. And he says, no, trust me, hold it like that. Because if you hold it the way you're holding it, you're going to hurt your arm, your shoulder, your back is going to start to hurt in the long run. And I'm like, no, I played for a week or two. It doesn't hurt. Right? He's like, nah, man, I've been playing for years now. It probably will hurt if you hold it like that. So to be able to really trust, and I guess that's where this, I always see, how certain students kind of talk about their guides, about their teachers in this extremely loving way, is because they really created this connection, this love between each other, this respect that they have for each other, to allow oneself to be like, I really trust you. I I know you're still human at the end of the day, because that's right. That's
Yeah.
another part of it.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a fine balance. And I think it takes a lot of skill, both as teacher and student, to find that balance and allow it to always be it's not a dead thing. It's always in flux. It's always kind of a call and response kind of thing. Adrienne.
I think you're on mute.
He's unmuted now. Yeah. but we can't hear you. Why is that? Not hearing you yet, no. Pesky Bluetooth problems. How
Now,
about... Yeah,
Ah,
I can hear you now.
okay, sorry about that.
All good.
Someone was saying, yeah, well, this, as a guitar teacher that I have been teaching guitar for many, many years now, for example, uh, there is also a factor, which is when you tell people to do something and they don't, but not only the position, also in the practice.
Mm-hmm.
That there is an analogy of what we're talking about, which is that all has to be practiced, like in a consistent, fastidious, daily basis in order to achieve any kind of result from it. You know, with no practice, it can be the most enlightened sheikh or whoever, teacher, or, can be whoever, and it won't change a thing. And then we come to that other, I think I heard here or somewhere else, but probably here too, which is oh, now I forgot. Okay, whatever. There's this, and what we were talking about, the free will thing. There's a there's a like a chess game trying to foresee what the results of your action are. So what would be the best possible outcome? Is it to be strolling? Is it to actually do something, to undo something? And there's this moment of reflection that Mushtaq was talking about with the stop. Yeah, exactly. Future pacing, right?
Thanks, Anissa.
There's another factor too, which is, trying to establish a healthy relationship with a part of you that actually knows what's correct and what's not, and obey it. It doesn't happen. Maybe it doesn't come easy at first. Sometimes it's very challenging. Sometimes it's very direct. But that also requires an effort and attention to be able to just respect this part of it. And it's very simple, but it's very difficult sometimes. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And like you, I've been teaching for many years, and I've taught a bunch of different things. And I've noticed that of every 100 students I've had, maybe one practiced. Yeah, I've had successful martial arts school with 30, 40 enrollees, and they would come twice a week, 3 times a week, and then they would come back the next week and they'd be where they left off. They had not improved a bit because they never practiced on their own at home. I have 2 students now, and I will tell you that they both practice daily, and that's why I have them. I don't have time for people who will just spend an hour with me and then go home for a week and not do anything.
Yeah, I used to tell them, the only way I know of learning to play the guitar is playing the guitar.
Yeah.
Only way I know, yeah. The only way I know of people to learn flamenco is to listen to flamenco. There's no way. Oh, you don't like the singing? Oh, I'm sorry, man. Flamenco is the singing. The guitar is just like an accompaniment thing. If you understand the singing, you understand the guitar, and you understand the dance, you understand everything. With no singing. So that's not what I want to say with that is that there's no pick and choose, right? There's no pick and choose that I like that part, the other part, well, not so much, you know.
Yep. Yeah, Anissa says there's no shortcut. There
No.
is no shortcut.
Nope.
And Austin says there needs to be a certain level of humility. I think that goes for teacher and student. But when it comes to learning something, humility is absolutely critical.
Yeah. And it's critical for a teacher because the moment you start believing your own press, you're doomed.
Yeah, and we see that time and time and time again. So, ugh, brutal. So, Ian, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I just wanted to give a little perspective on a different angle on this. I totally agree about the practice thing. When I was 16, I had been playing piano for, I think, since I was 7. I didn't really enjoy it until I was 14. And then I think it was because I really discovered Bach and I just loved that. So I started practicing. The problem is I had had a teacher for several years at that point who was the local church organist who basically didn't teach me a damn thing. So, of course, I had no idea of technique or anything like that. And then when I was 16, I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to get 2 instruments with professional teachers. And the main one I want to talk about is the piano, but I will just say one thing about the cello in relation to holding it. I mean, one of the very first thing you learn with a cello is that you don't watch the keyboard. I mean, the fretboard. You can't. You have to learn how to move up and down it without being able to see it. But with the piano, it was very different. I had already taken what they call grade 8, which was the highest sort of exam you could take through high school level and passed it by that point. But what I discovered through getting this professional concert pianist as my teacher was that I had no technique at all. So he had to teach me from scratch, not only how to practice, but also how to unlearn all of the bad habits that I'd accumulated over the years. And during those 2 years, they were really that I had before I left school. They were really productive. Because I even before that I'd been practicing every day because I started to love the instrument. And unfortunately, once I went to university, I really wasn't in an environment where I was able to do that. And once I started work, it was even more impossible. But during those 2 years, it was quite amazing how much better I got because of learning the technique, learning the proper approach to the instrument and the proper techniques. I just thought I'd throw that in from a different perspective because it's not just having a teacher who it's not just listening to the teacher, it's having a teacher who is really good.
Thanks, Ian. Did you want to respond to that, Adrian?
Yeah, well, there one thing that I used to say to the students too is give yourself the opportunity to learn, which is for me it was a major gap. It for me happened a different way, and that pertains to what we were talking before. When I started playing the guitar, it was very easy. I was very gifted somehow, or I don't know. I just did it. I loved it. immediately, and I got obsessed with it, and it turned out to be good very soon. So I could play very fast stuff, very difficult stuff, complicated and everything. The worst thing that happened to me was exactly that, because until I started playing music, it took me ages. It took me decades to play music. Well, now I'm very content with the results, but music playing and moving fingers at learning technique are definitely not the same thing, you know. So music playing is much more related to silence than to moving fingers, you know, and the technique and the thing. Oh, I mean, technique is a very important topic too, of course. You know? But silence, I think, and listening, self-listening, listen to others is the number one thing, which then comes back to what we were talking before, right?
Yeah, especially if you're playing with any sort of ensemble.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of ties back to what I was saying about this being like at least when we're talking about being in dialogue with a teacher or with fellow strivers, let's say, it's a call and response thing. We need to be able to speak out and we need to be able to hear, and you got to be able to do both. Yeah. Let me make sure I have gotten through everything in the chat. Yeah, Austin was talking about the yes and being a great sales technique, because it's like you lead the person where you want them to go by not, you're not trying to negate what they're saying to you. You're just like, yes, and here's what I want for you. But yeah, the only thing we're trying to sell you is the value of being awake.
Yes, and you can pay for it if you want.
Yeah, sure.
In the call and response, I just had a good teacher that actually said to me when a student is asking a question, to couch it in a way that encourages them to keep asking. But sometimes they've mustered up this courage to say it once, but they could never do it a second time. So yeah, Adrienne understands where you say, I say to people, this lady. So we were holding a stance where we were legs apart, hip width apart. And she said, in yoga, we do it like this. We have to do it 1 foot behind the other. And I just stopped, paused, and said, this isn't yoga. This is stretch therapy. And she went, oh, you're right. But I said, it's a good question, because now I can explain why we're in this stance. And then by explaining to her why I had changed it or altered it in a way that was improving a particular thing that we were doing, there was more understanding in the whole class versus just her. But it always, I said, do not be afraid to ask me a question. I said, please challenge me if you don't understand something and ask it again, so that I have to think of another way to approach to answer. So in this call and response thing, that has been a really powerful lesson to me, because I learn more. I said, when my student can ask a question, then I think, oh, they've got a perspective. I didn't quite see it quite that way, but it has validity. It's real for them. That's their experience. And so I don't want to feel like I'm crushing their spirit, because we're learning together, which is really lovely. And I feel that's the same, the way you guys are inviting challenge, inviting questions. And that's a very powerful way for me to learn, because that's why I don't say a lot in the beginning, because all of you guys are bringing something like, I've never heard of that before. I've never thought of that before. And I really enjoy that. So I appreciate that very much.
Me too. I feel like we experience that all the time, don't we, Mushtaq?
Yeah.
I do. I'll speak for myself. Yeah. So
Yeah, you speak for both of us.
yeah. Thank you, Shri. Ian?
Yeah, on another random digression. I'm thinking back to the very first mentor I had. He wasn't my first manager, um, but he was the first important one. And he was a very smart guy. He'd been to Oxford and so on. And one of the things he taught me was that he made a practice of asking dumb questions. And his logic was that if he was the smartest person in the room, which he very likely was, and he was having the slightest difficulty understanding what somebody was saying, it was more than probable that everybody else was also having difficulty. Um, and so he made a point of this all the time, and I really took that to heart and have tried to practice it.
I like that. Smart. Ah,
And sometimes dumb questions are the most fun.
yes. Wow. Do you have anything you want to add, Mushtaq?
Practice the pause.
Yeah. Door handle, cell phone, stuff like that. The free won't.
Yes.
Give it a try.
And you can ask yourself, does this person deserve to have authority over me? That's always a fun one.
All right. Anissa, are you good? Do you have anything you want to share?
No, I don't really have anything to share, no.
I mean, you've offered some good stuff. I just wanted to give you the chance to speak if you wanted to, but thank you so much for everything that you've offered. And it's been cool sitting by the firelight with you. All right, so I guess we can go to Brady Bunch mode.
Let's
if
go
we
to
aren't
Brady Bunch
already.
mode.
Yes. Thanks for spending time with us for us this evening, this morning for some of you, so this afternoon. It's been lovely. Thank you for such wonderful contributions to this conversation. And hopefully everyone is taking something with them that is meaningful and useful. Meanwhile, yes, let's see if anyone is on the fence about the retreat. Let's get it moving. We definitely want to get the ball rolling and make sure that everything is squared away sooner rather than later. Very excited about that. And we will talk to you next week. Take care, everybody.
That's right. Bye, folks.
Bye.